Hey guys, tonight we wake up next to a sack of dried cod in a Viking longhouse that smells like something pickled a year too long. Your blanket is a greasy sheep pelt, your pillow is your own arm, and the floor is generously decorated with straw, soot, and maybe a beetle or three. Someone's snoring beside you, possibly human, possibly just a very vocal pig. There's smoke from last night's fire still clinging to the air, and the ceiling is low enough that you can count the splinters. Welcome to the Viking Age. You're a merchant. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, you're about to discover that entrepreneurship in the year 875 means frostbite, robbery, and body odor. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know your local time and where you're tuning in from. Post it in the comments if you're awake enough to type. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first realization, even before you open your eyes properly, is that your back hurts in at least 6 different places. Your second realization is that you're not in a bed because beds are reserved for chieftains, their wives, and perhaps a favorite goat. You're on the floor, sharing space with burlap sacks, a bucket that may or may not be for food, and several other sleeping bodies. At least 2 of those bodies snore like dying walruses. You lift the pelt covering you and inhale the unmistakable aroma of stale sweat, dried fish, and something sour, possibly fermented herring, possibly someone's feet. The longhouse is one big open room, shared by family members, animals, and the occasional hitchhiker from another village. Privacy doesn't exist, unless you count covering your face with a rag and pretending you're invisible. There are no windows, just a smoke hole at the top of the thatched roof that barely does its job. Light seeps in through gaps in the wall planks, and you can hear the soft gurgle of water from the nearby fjord. It's kind of peaceful, until someone coughs loudly and turns over, smacking you in the ribs with an elbow that might as well be a hammer. You sit up, your joints crack like poorly made pottery. Your clothes are already on you because you sleep in them, always. A wool tunic, crusted with last week's seawater and fish scales. The smell is not subtle. You trudge outside, shoving aside a curtain of woven reeds, pretending to be a door. The morning air slaps you in the face like a disgruntled goose. Cold, damp, and thick with fog. You're in a village perched on the edge of a Nordic coastline, where every breeze smells faintly of seaweed and existential dread. You stretch. Your knees pop. A child runs past, barefoot and shrieking with laughter, chasing a chicken. The chicken is losing. Someone nearby is already hammering metal, because blacksmiths apparently don't sleep. Or maybe they just hate you personally. You glance toward your cart, half filled with furs, soapstone trinkets, and whatever else you've scrounged to trade today. There's a nagging awareness that something might have chewed on it overnight. You'll check the damage later. Right now, you need to locate something resembling food, and maybe a goddamned cup of something warm, which is a big ask in a world where hot beverages are as mythical as dragons. The life of a Viking merchant doesn't start with glory. It starts with sore feet, a stiff back, and the knowledge that today you might sell 3 amber beads, or you might fall off a boat and be eaten by crabs. Historians still argue whether merchants in this era were respected community figures or just tolerated nuisances with pockets full of strange coins and big promises. Either way, you're essential, but not essential enough to get an actual bed. You pull your cloak tighter, step over a puddle of dubious origin, and begin your day. Congratulations. You are now officially awake in the Viking Age. You begin your glorious day as a Viking merchant by trying not to break your ankle on the uneven dirt path that calls itself a main road. It's not so much a road as it is a communal tripping hazard with added manure. You squelch through something suspiciously warm and sincerely hope it came from an animal. Morning dew clings to your already damp shoes, which are essentially stitched scraps of leather pretending to be footwear. Arch support hasn't been invented, and it shows. Breakfast is optimistically named. You don't eat at a table because you don't have a table. Instead, you squat beside a wooden bowl filled with yesterday's porridge reboiled into today's porridge, featuring bonus wood ash for flavor. There's no cutlery. You use your fingers, or a stick, or just slurp it like a confused dog. The porridge clings to your teeth in a way that makes you question your life choices. Not that you had any. The grain supply was imported, probably from across the sea. And there's always the delightful tension of wondering whether this batch contains extra weevils. Protein, right beside you. Someone bites into a chunk of smoked fish so aggressively it sounds like a bone cracking. You nod politely. That's Bjorn. Bjorn once survived a storm at sea by eating his own boot. He's considered lucky. You grab a strip of dried meat, possibly lamb, possibly rat, and chew, and chew, and chew. It's not so much edible as it is resistant to death. Vikings didn't invent jerky, but they certainly perfected the technique of turning meat into a chewing-based endurance sport. Drinks you might get some ale. Weak ale, ale that tastes like it, forgot what barley was halfway through brewing. Water is generally unsafe unless you enjoy parasites, stomach cramps, and a 3-day trip to the afterlife. Some say the gods purify the fjords. Most say boil it and pray. As you eat, or attempt to, you scan your home. Your house is communal. You don't have a kitchen, just a fire pit in the center of the longhouse where everyone cooks, smokes meat, and occasionally singes their eyebrows. The smoke stains everything: your tunic, your lungs, and your social life. You don't wash your clothes often because water's too precious. You just let the smoke do its best. At least you've got a roof. That puts you ahead of travelers who sleep on their carts or under boats turned upside down. The roof is thatched and mostly watertight. Unless the storm comes in sideways, then it's just decorative. Outside, your fellow villagers are stirring. A young boy leads a goat by a rope. The goat seems skeptical. A woman is already scrubbing fish guts off a wooden board using a pine branch. You hear someone shouting about missing tools. You assume it's another morning in paradise. Your job is to trade, not to till the fields or catch fish, but don't get excited. Being a merchant doesn't mean luxury. It means lifting crates, fixing carts, arguing over the value of a squirrel pelt, and occasionally running from bandits who think free enterprise means steal everything not nailed down. Also, your inventory limited, your wealth imaginary. Most of your profits go toward bribes, taxes, boat repairs, and patching holes in your cloak. You once traded a whole roll of linen for a handful of glass beads, only to find out the beads were just dyed quartz. The other guy said buyer beware and walked off laughing. You still think about it in the dark. Historians still argue whether Viking merchants were primarily seafaring opportunists or more like medieval eBay sellers with body odor. Either way, your work begins before sunrise and ends when your muscles give out. You finish your porridge, wipe your fingers on your tunic, which only makes the grease shinier, and grunt your way to standing. There's a marketplace to reach by midday, and it's 3 miles uphill both ways. At least it feels that way. So you hoist your pack, tighten the frayed leather cord around your waist, and tell yourself this day might be profitable. Might. Just ignore the dark clouds on the horizon. They could be storm clouds, or they could be raiders. Either way, you have work to do. Now that you're on the road, nature calls loudly and without mercy. But this isn't the modern world where toilets flush. Privacy exists, and you can shame-scroll Instagram while you sit. No, you're a Viking merchant, and going to the bathroom is an exercise in humility, discomfort, and spiritual questioning. You look around, trees sparse, bushes thorny. The nearest facility is a shared trench dug behind a hill, helpfully referred to as the place. It's just the place. You don't name it. Naming gives it power. The trench is long, shallow, and already suspiciously full of things that look too solid to be yesterday's soup. So you do what every proud Viking merchant must do. You check that nobody is watching. Hike up your woolen tunic, scratchy as ever, and you squat like dignity is optional. And it is. Because truly, dignity is a luxury few can afford when their bottom is freezing against damp dirt. Toilet paper. That's adorable. You use moss or maybe snow if it's winter. Once, in a pinch, you used an unlucky piece of fur from your own cloak. It haunts you still. There's no concept of sanitary. That word won't be invented for centuries. Instead, you tell yourself that the cold air is cleansing and that parasites are just bonus roommates. Public toilets do exist in bigger Viking settlements. But calling them toilets is generous. They're communal pits, sometimes with planks laid across for seating planks that wobble like they've accepted their fate. You've heard tales of people falling in. You don't ask whether they were rescued. You just assume they were absorbed. And yes, everyone uses the same pit. Men, women, children, probably goats. Privacy is for monks and royalty. If you're lucky, someone sings loudly nearby to mask the symphony of grunts and splashes. If you're not lucky, they make eye contact and strike up a conversation. Toilets, in the Viking world, are social experiments, usually failed ones. You clean yourself with a fistful of snow that might contain gravel, or bark, or both. The sting reminds you you're alive. Barely. You tell yourself the cold will numb the shame. It doesn't. You shiver, pull your clothes back up, and try to pretend none of this happened. And then you realize that smell, it's following you. Because you, like everyone else, stepped in something on the way out. The concept of shoes with proper soles is still on holiday in the future. So your feet are now both wet and questionable. You scrape your heel against a rock and hope for the best. Historians still argue whether Viking hygiene was surprisingly advanced or just very enthusiastic dirt. Some say they bathed weekly in bathhouses, using lye soap and scraping tools. Others insist those were outliers, and most people walked around with a layer of grime thicker than their clothing. What's clear is this: you are not clean. You are Viking clean, which is to say, a little less filthy than the goat. You rejoin the path, nose wrinkling at your own aura. But you're not alone. The man beside you smells of fish guts and fermented onions. A woman passes, holding a basket of dried dung to use for fire fuel. She nods politely. You nod back, because this is the Viking version of mutual respect. You trudge onward, reminding yourself that sanitation is for the weak or the rich or the future, probably all three. The trench is behind you, the stench is not. You feel lighter but also more burdened somehow. And now, finally, with the call of nature answered, you can focus on your next obstacle, selling enough pelts to buy some spoiled cabbage for dinner. Because clearly, things can always get worse. You would think that after the toilet ordeal, the universe might offer you a little culinary comfort. Maybe a hearty stew, a crisp apple, a loaf of bread that doesn't double as a blunt force weapon. But no, welcome to Viking merchant cuisine, where your options are what you brought, what's rotting, or what's slightly less rotted. You sit by your campfire, which is more smoke than flame, and open your provisions sack. The air immediately smells like an argument between sour milk and seaweed. Inside, dried fish. Again, not fresh, not flaky, just chewy slabs of sadness that taste like they lost a bet. Some of it has hair. You don't ask what kind, you just scrape it off and chew with the same dead-eyed focus you used in the trench. You try to soften the fish with water. Mistake. The water smells vaguely of swamp and regret. You boil it, hoping to kill the bacteria and, ideally, your sense of smell. You sip. It's warm. That's the only positive note. You imagine a life where water is clear and doesn't crunch. Then you remember you are a Viking merchant, not a spa influencer. You rummage deeper in your sack and find your second treat, a chunk of barley bread. It's rock hard. Literally. You could hurt someone with this bread. Historians still argue whether it was designed to be eaten or wielded in combat. You dunk it in the fish broth. It disintegrates like wet wood and leaves behind what you assume are bugs. Maybe they're spices. Maybe they're ancestors. Either way, they're extra protein. Your stomach groans not out of hunger, but protest. You are not feeding it, you are challenging it. The meal is a dare, not a comfort. You look around at your fellow merchants. One is chewing something green and stringy. You hope it's moss. He looks like he regrets every life decision. Another tries to skewer a rat on a stick with a look that says, "Don't judge me." You don't. You're considering it yourself. And forget about dessert. Vikings didn't do dessert. Sugar wasn't a thing. Honey was rare and guarded like treasure. If someone offers you something sweet, they're probably trying to marry you, or poison you. Possibly both. Food poisoning is a regular part of life. Your intestines are used to battling strange bacteria like they're in a gladiator arena. You've had more bad shellfish than birthdays. And yet, Somehow, you still hope maybe tomorrow someone will bring smoked pork, or cheese, or a turnip that isn't cursed. To keep food from spoiling, you rely on drying, salting, or pickling. And none of these methods improve taste. Salted meat tastes like salt. Pickled cabbage tastes like vinegar and desperation. Dried berries taste like regret wrapped in bark. But it's calories. You eat because not eating means weakness. And in the Viking world, weakness means dying cold in a ditch. You know that high-status Vikings feasted on wild boar and mead. You're not high status. You're merchant tier, which means you get the leftovers of leftovers. You trade for goods, not gourmet. Sometimes you swap pelts for grain or nuts, but half of that ends up worm-ridden or moldy by the time you reach your next stop. One time, someone traded you meat that turned out to be squirrel. Possibly, the tale was inconclusive. Still, you eat, slowly, gratefully, bitterly. Because starving on an empty stomach is somehow worse than starving on a full one. One quirky historical fact, Vikings considered onions a form of health test. If you fed someone onion soup and their breath still smelled like onions hours later, it meant they had internal injuries. You wonder what your breath smells like now. Probably fish and broken dreams. You finish the meal with a sip of warm ale that tastes like wet socks. It's mildly alcoholic, which means it doubles as hydration and emotional escape. You feel it hit your bloodstream like a sigh. You stare into the smoke and try not to envy the goat chewing grass beside you. He looks satisfied. His meal was fresh. Yours might be plotting revenge. You stand, belly half full of salted despair, and brush off your tunic, though honestly. Brushing does nothing except relocate the grime from one patch to another. Welcome to Viking Age fashion, where the cut is rustic, the color is brown, and the fabric is essentially sandpaper. You're wearing your best tunic today, which means it's only partly moth-eaten and the sleeves are mostly the same length. It's made of coarse wool, scratchier than your ex's last words, and somehow both itchy and damp. The wool traps every scent you've ever encountered: smoke, fish, sweat, possibly goat. You think you smell better than your neighbor, but only because you haven't fainted yet. And that's just your tunic. Underneath, you have linen, or what used to be linen. Now it's more like a tissue that's been through 10 winters and a bad breakup. It clings in all the wrong places and sags in the rest. There's no elastic, no tailoring, no mercy, and you don't change your clothes. You own maybe 2 sets, if you're lucky, and you rotate them the way one rotates curses, sparingly and with dread. Washing them you could, but water is freezing, soap is luxury, and scrubbing wool is a form of self-harm, so you air them out, hoping that wind can defeat odor. Spoiler, it can't. Shoes, technically, yes. Leather, stitched by someone who probably had poor vision and a loose understanding of symmetry. They offer the same protection as a wet napkin and fall apart the moment you think about puddles. Your feet are always cold, always damp, and always slightly surprised they're still attached. You look down and see mud crusted on the hem of your trousers. The mud might be from a river, or a street, or someone else's toilet run. You've stopped asking. Now, about accessories, don't expect jewelry unless it's for trade. Instead, you're accessorized with lice. Lots of them. Your head itches constantly. Fleas do a little dance up your leg. You're like a walking buffet for every parasite north of the equator. Historians still argue whether Vikings actually combed their hair regularly or just posed with combs for burial rituals. Either way, you've got one carved from bone. It looks nice. It breaks immediately upon meeting your tangles. Head wear a woolen cap, if you're lucky. If not, your head is exposed to the wind, the rain, and the occasional bird with poor aim. Your cloak is your only real defense against the elements. And it doubles as a blanket, a bedroll, and sometimes a bargaining chip. It smells like mildew and carries enough bacteria to be declared sentient. You wear it with pride mainly because taking it off would reveal the holes in your shirt. You remember how people in modern times complain about tags scratching their necks. In Viking times, everything scratches. Your seams are coarse. Your underarms are rubbed raw. Every movement is a reminder that comfort is a modern concept. And don't get romantic about embroidery or dyed tunics. Only the rich got that. You, the merchant on the road, Wear browns and greys so uniformly that you're camouflaged against a mud wall, which is handy. Since you occasionally nap against mud walls, you spot another merchant in what looks like blue fabric. You're briefly jealous until you realize the blue is just sweat-stained grey. Tragic, but relatable. One odd historical tidbit: some Viking garments were stitched with human hair. Hair was strong and apparently plentiful. You don't know if yours are. You don't want to know. It's best not to think about who you're wrapped in. You try to warm your fingers by rubbing them together inside your cloak. It helps for a second. Then the wind whips through the gaps in your tunic, and suddenly your ribcage feels like a xylophone played by frost. You sit again and pull your cloak tight. It traps some heat and a lot of odor. Your body is starting to accept this life half covered, half frozen, entirely itchy. The worst part, it could always be worse. If you were poorer, your clothes might be made of reeds or bark. If you were richer, you might wear silks but also become a kidnapping target. So, you remain in the middle, uncomfortable enough to suffer, unimportant enough to survive. Your teeth hurt. That's the first thing you notice when you bite into a piece of dried cod and feel a jolt of pain zigzag up into your temple like a lightning bolt sent by an angry Norse god. You stop chewing and sit very still, praying the ache will subside. It doesn't. It pulses. Dental hygiene in the Viking Age is, in a word, theoretical. You don't brush what would you brush with a stick. A fishbone, some folks chew twigs, but mostly to keep their hands busy during long winter nights, not because anyone believes it helps. The concept of bacteria completely alien. You think cavities are caused by angry spirits, or maybe elves. What you do have is a growing awareness that something in your mouth is definitely rotting. Your breath could probably stun a bear. It's not your fault. There's no toothpaste, no floss, and no TikTok dental routines. There's also no dentist, not in the modern sense. If you're lucky, the local healer might give you some fermented root to chew on. If you're unlucky, and let's face it, the solution is a pair of iron tongs and a friend with a strong grip. Historians still argue whether Vikings routinely pulled bad teeth or just toughed it out until the infection killed them. Based on your current experience, both seem equally plausible. You try massaging your gums, which are swollen, red, and prone to bleeding at even the suggestion of pressure. They throb rhythmically, like drums at a midsummer sacrifice. One loose molar wiggles when you talk. You consider pulling it out yourself. Then remember you have no anesthesia, just ale. Lots and lots of ale. And even that's only mildly numbing after 3 mugs. Speaking of ale, let's talk nutrition or the lack thereof. Your diet. Rich in salt-dried fish, hard barley bread, and the occasional root vegetable. Does not do your mouth any favors. You haven't seen a citrus fruit in your life. Scurvy is lurking in the background like a grumpy roommate, ready to make your gums peel off your teeth. It's not dramatic, it's just historical fact. And if the pain isn't enough, you've also got bad breath. Not mild, I forgot to chew mint leaves bad breath. We're talking a seal died in my esophagus and I've been carrying it around for 3 days. Bad breath. You notice people leaning slightly away when you talk. Even your goat seems offended. You remember someone once told you to rub charcoal on your teeth to clean them. You tried. It made them look worse, feel gritty, and tasted like disappointment. So you gave up. There's a quirky historical tidbit floating in your brain. Some Vikings used twigs from certain trees like birch or hazel as rudimentary brushes. Not because they were dentists, but because those twigs felt cleaner. You tried one once. It splintered. Now there's probably wood lodged in your gum line. Great. You lean over to spit, and something black and chunky drops from your mouth into the dirt. You decide not to look too closely. Whatever it was, it's not your problem anymore. There are no mirrors in your world. Your only reflection is a warped shimmer on still water. But you catch a glimpse of yourself one morning, and yep, your teeth are definitely several shades of prehistoric ivory. Some are missing. One is chipped, another is grey. It's like a dental museum exhibit of what not to do. You try not to smile, not because you're moody, but because you don't want to startle small children. Medicine in the Viking Age is part herbalism, part superstition, and all pain. Someone suggests you hold a bone fragment under your tongue while whispering a protection chant. Another person swears by tying a raven feather around your jaw. You nod politely. Then go drink stale beer until you forget which side of your face hurts. You lie back one night, aching jaw clenched, and wonder how anyone in this era managed to live past 30 without turning into a walking infection. You think about skulls in museums cracked, gapped, worn down, and realize those people were just like you, hungry, tired, and slightly terrified of their own molars. And then there's the final indignity when your tooth does fall out, and it leaves a jagged hole that collects food, aches with cold wind, and never truly heals. You can feel it now, that hollow space where something used to live. It echoes when you breathe. You push your tongue into the gap, then immediately regret it. You taste metal, salt, and something suspiciously like rot. You sigh. This is your mouth now. Your grimy, painful, Viking mouth. You wrap a bit of linen around your jaw, trying to soothe the swelling. It helps. A little. You fall asleep that night to the sound of your heartbeat thumping through your cheek. You wake up with your jaw still aching. But that's a background issue now because today is a work day. Which, to be fair, is every day. There are no weekends in the Viking Age. No PTO, no paid lunch breaks. Just sun-up to sundown labor, and then some. You're a merchant, technically, but before you start imagining rich trade halls and silk robes, let's be clear, you're the kind of merchant who hauls your own cargo, builds your own tent, and still ends up with lice. The kind of merchant who barters a barrel of dried fish for 2 chipped combs and a weak promise of payment in 3 months. The glamorous life. You trudge down the muddy road toward the docks, your cartwheel already stuck in a rut. It's the same cart that lost its axle pin last week, so now the wheel wobbles like a drunk goat. You fix it with rope and hope. That's your entire maintenance strategy. Your cargo salted herring, dull knives, some amber beads, and cloth that smells vaguely of sheep and absolutely of mildew. Historians still argue whether merchants had guilds or official protections. You laugh at the idea. You have protection. His name is Life, and he's a cousin who charges a ridiculous fee to stand nearby and look intimidating. You walk for miles. You pass other traders, some on horseback, which feels deeply unfair, and they nod or scowl, or try to sell you something they probably just stole. Every mile is labor. Every transaction is exhausting. And your profits are thinner than the soles of your shoes. Your hands are calloused from lifting crates. Your back aches from bending. Your legs are sore from walking on roads that are mostly creative interpretations of flat surface. There are potholes, loose stones, and the occasional angry goose. You don't win those fights, even when you're not traveling. Work is constant. You fix your roof when it leaks, chop wood for fires, haul water, clean fish, smoke meat, and mend clothes. You don't delegate. There's no one to delegate to. You are the labor force. You are the help. You are the entire HR department. And when you finally return home at night, sore and starving, your wife reminds you that the loom broke and the goat kicked over the grain sack. You nod, then go repair the loom using a splinter and sheer optimism. Your children, if you have them, are working too. There's no childhood in the modern sense. At 5, they carry kindling. At 7, they sort fish. At 10, they're practically apprentices, still small. Still learning, but already doing more than most modern interns. You glance over at your son, who's trying to patch a leather pouch using a bent nail and a very large frown. You don't say anything, you just silently hand him a sharper tool and pat his head. It's bonding. Viking style. Your wife, meanwhile, is no less busy. She manages the household cooking, weaving, child wrangling, animal care, all while enduring the same freezing mornings and cramped conditions. Stay-at-home mum is not a cushy gig. It's a 16-hour shift without lunch breaks. Even your sleep is work-adjacent. You dream about market stalls. You worry about debts. You wonder if the neighbor is stealing your smoked salmon while you're out. Probably. And let's not forget the glorious side hustles. On top of trading, you might make your own rope, brew your own beer, or carve your own boat oars. Not because you're a passionate artisan, but because buying them would cost more than your goat. You remember hearing a rumor once some merchants, the rich ones, traveled as far as Constantinople. That sounds magical. Exotic. Also wildly unlikely for someone like you, whose idea of an adventure is making it to the market without a sprained ankle. Still, you daydream about it while lifting another crate. Constantinople, silk, gold, a warm bath. None of it's real for you, but it helps pass the time between blisters. There's a quirky tidbit in your mind. Some Norse traders used walrus ivory as currency. You tried that once. It got stolen before you could even haggle. Now you stick to coin, beads, or direct exchange. I give you fish, you give me boots. It's capitalism, but sadder. Sometimes, on better days, you manage to trade up some soapstone here, a good iron knife there. You string together enough wins to afford a thicker blanket, or real bread. But those wins are rare and fleeting, and immediately followed by more walking. You finish your day by rolling your shoulders, realizing one is lower than the other now. That's fine. That's just asymmetry by exhaustion. You walk home in near darkness, dodging carts and puddles. Your boots squelching and your stomach growling. You count your coin pouch. 3 coppers and a splinter. Big day. You wake the next morning to the sound of something dripping on your forehead. That's either a leak from the thatched roof or condensed breath from the icy ceiling beams. Either way, it's a terrible way to start the day, and a gentle reminder that weather in the Viking Age is less of a background element and more of a full-time antagonist. The cold is immediate, stabbing, unrelenting. Your bones ache from it. You curl tighter under your fur blanket if you're lucky enough to have one and try to ignore the crust of frost on your nose. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, you feel like a smoked herring left out in a snowdrift. The hut walls creak. They're made of wattle and daub, layered with sod. And absolutely zero insulation. Temperature control means opening or closing a hole in the roof. You can light a fire. Sure, but the smoke just hangs in the rafters, slowly turning your lungs into soup. Historians still argue whether Viking homes had chimneys or just smoked everyone equally. Judging by your current cough, it's the latter. Your fingers are numb before you even get your boots on. And by boots, we mean cloth wrappings shoved into hide shoes that have seen better centuries. They hold out water the same way a sponge holds back the sea. You step outside and immediately regret it. The wind doesn't just cut through you, it files a full eviction notice on your soul. You squint against snowflakes the size of feathers, blown horizontal by a breeze that could strip bark from a tree. Your eyebrows freeze. Literally. Your breath crystallizes mid-air like decorative misery. And then comes summer. Yes. Summer, the season of warmth and mosquito-driven torment. You thought winter was bad. Try sleeping in a wooden box with no windows, no fans, and 50 buzzing roommates. Your skin itches from sweat and bug bites. You can't open a window because you don't have a window. You flap a piece of cloth at your face like it'll save you. The inside of your house becomes a sauna made of damp wool and human regret. You stick to every surface. You dream of ice. You hallucinate cold baths. You consider leaping into a fjord and accepting your fate as a soggy Viking ghost. At night, you lie motionless, arms out like a starfish, trying not to touch anyone or anything. Your skin prickles, your hair sticks. You pray for even a hint of breeze. You get a spider crawling over your shoulder instead. And the bugs. Oh, the bugs. Flies in your food, gnats in your ears, mosquitoes with PhDs in stealth attacks. You're a walking buffet. You slap your arm, miss, and hit your own face. You do it again. Summer is a farce. There's no real spring or fall, just transition periods between frozen despair and boiled misery. Your clothes don't help. You own exactly one outfit. It's made of wool. In winter, it's too thin. In summer, it's a heat-trapping oven mitt. Changing clothes. Washing them, not really on the menu. You just stew in your own seasonal juices. You try to make improvements. A thicker blanket, a roof patch, some smoke holes. They help, slightly. But the wind finds you. The heat traps you. The seasons have personalities, and they all hate you. You've heard stories, southern lands with breezes, with vines and citrus trees and warm stone baths. You try to imagine it while wiping sweat from your brow with the same sleeve you used to scrape frost last month. You wonder what it's like to be warm just enough. A quirky fact flickers through your head. Vikings sometimes used heated stones placed in beds for warmth. You tried that once. You cracked your toe and set a piece of straw on fire. The stone glared at you. You glared back. You've learned to predict the weather by sniffing the air, watching the clouds, or listening to your neighbor swear at the sky. That's the meteorological report grunts, complaints, and the occasional scream when a snowdrift collapses on your firewood pile. Everything is damp, or everything is dry. But it's never comfortable. Comfort is a luxury you left behind when you time-traveled here in your sleep. The weather is never just background noise. It's the drumbeat of your life. It shapes your routine, your energy, your food, your mood. It determines whether your wares make it to market, whether the fishing boat comes back, whether your child gets a fever and survives. You stare at the horizon, watching grey clouds form like a slow punch. You breathe in air that tastes like frozen leather. You blink through the wind. You sigh, and then you get back to work. The water looks clean, clear, but you know better. You eye the wooden bucket suspiciously. It was filled from the stream, just uphill of the tannery, which isn't exactly the Viking equivalent of a Brita filter. Still, you need it to drink, to cook, maybe even to bathe if you're feeling wildly optimistic. Just not all at once. Water in the Viking Age is like a shady business partner, essential, ever present, and almost guaranteed to betray you. Drink it, and you risk stomach cramps, parasites, or worse. Don't drink it, and you'll be dehydrated within a day. It's a lose-lose situation where thirst is the least painful outcome. You glance at your cup, wooden, cracked, vaguely moldy. You take a sip and brace yourself. It's lukewarm, with a distinct aftertaste of pondweed and regret. Refreshing. Or not. Bathing is a whole other saga. Historians still argue whether Vikings bathed weekly, bi-weekly, or only when their friends started throwing rocks at them. There's evidence of bathhouses, steam rooms, and even wooden tubs. Sure. But unless you live in a trading city or happen to be chummy with someone wealthy enough to own a hot spring, your daily wash is more of a monthly rinse and scream. Your shower involves pouring cold water over your head from a bucket, hoping the kids don't see, and praying the gods spare you a pneumonia. You strip down to your linen undershirt, already questionable in cleanliness, and hop from foot to foot on the icy floor like a tipsy goat. Soap made from animal fat and ash. Not exactly lavender-scented spa bars, and let's not forget that according to medieval medical wisdom, bathing opened the pores, which was basically an invitation for disease to crawl in and take up residence. So, most people avoid it. You dab with a rag, maybe rub yourself with dry moss, or do what your neighbor does, aggressively reapply bear fat and hope for the best. That man smells like a smoked goat dipped in oil, and somehow still thinks he's charming. Still, water isn't just for washing or drinking, it's everywhere and it's lethal. Rivers flood, streams run dry, wells collapse. You hear stories of people getting cholera. Although the term hasn't been invented yet, you just call it the death that leaks. 1 minute you're thirsty, the next your stomach sounds like a thunderstorm, and your future looks very short. Then there are the worms. Yes, worms, in your guts. Or maybe you're one of the lucky ones with a tapeworm that becomes your lifelong companion. Like a very clingy pet with no boundaries. The old woman in the next village claims to have passed one that was as long as a fishing net. She's now a local legend and also completely alone at community meals. On the fringe side of things, some people claim drinking water mixed with silver coins wards off sickness. You tried it once. It made you feel sophisticated for 3 seconds until you bit the coin by accident and chipped a tooth. That one still hurts. But here's the kicker despite everything. Water is still revered. You pray for rain during dry months. You build your life around rivers and harbors. You fear the sea, but you also feed off it. You fetch buckets with hope, fill barrels with care, and celebrate when the snow melts into something potable. Your children are warned to stay away from deep wells and fast rivers. Not because of mythical sea serpents, though those stories help, but because slipping means drowning. No lifeguards, no floaties, just cold water and silence. You remember one trader who claimed his brother died from evil water. Everyone nodded solemnly. No one asked what that meant. You all just understood. You look at your bucket again, then glance out at the sea beyond the village. It's grey and endless, flickering under a pale sky. Somewhere out there, merchants sail between kingdoms, dodging storms and sea monsters, both real and metaphorical. Some never return. You wonder if their water was any cleaner. But for now, you lift your cup, mutter a small prayer to the gods of not dying from diarrhea, and take another careful sip. Now, we wake up in the armpit of history literally and figuratively. You're curled on the third floor of a creaking Roman insula, which is a fancy way of saying apartment building made of kindling and optimism. A neighbor's toddler is crying. Someone downstairs is coughing in Latin, and the ceiling is definitely sagging a little lower than yesterday. Congratulations, you're living in wartime Rome, and it smells exactly like you'd expect a city of 1 million unwashed people to smell when aqueducts are broken and the army's off dying somewhere inconvenient. You would never think that the ancient Romans, master architects, founders of law, wearers of short skirts, could build something that wobbles when a pigeon lands on it. But here we are. The walls of your apartment groan with the weight of history, which is probably a poetic way of saying the mortar is failing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, post your location and what time it is where you're listening, so I can picture a whole map of bleary-eyed history nerds slowly drifting off together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch, which is unfortunate, because something in your back pops, and now you're walking like a tragic statue. Your blanket is a stained wool scrap. The temperature is somewhere between clammy soup and parchment oven. You step onto the cold stone floor and immediately step back off. It's wet, and you didn't spill anything. Someone outside is shouting about bread rations again. Yesterday, it was about someone stealing a goose. The day before taxes, always taxes. Rome, even in wartime, runs on bureaucracy, loud neighbors, and rumors with the half-life of a sneeze. Your breakfast isn't waiting, it's hiding. Somewhere in your kitchen, okay, your shelf near the broken clay stove, you have stale barley mush and a few shriveled olives. But eating those now means you'll have nothing left for dinner. Welcome to wartime math. It's less about numbers and more about how long you can trick your stomach into thinking air is food. You're not the only one doing this calculus. Every thud on the stairs is someone else heading down to the street market, hoping today's black market price for bread is only horrifying and not mythical. You know what mythical bread costs your dignity, your sister's earrings, and probably a chicken you don't even own. Outside your tiny window, currently covered in a scrap of linen and wishful thinking, you hear the distant horn of the city watch. That means it's morning, or someone died, or both. The hornist's not very consistent, bless him. Historians still argue whether life in wartime Rome was more terrifying inside the walls or out. Inside, you're relatively safe from the barbarians, but you're absolutely not safe from fire, disease, gossip, or falling bricks. Yesterday, a man 2 floors down leaned out his window to curse at a cat, and the entire archway collapsed. The cat's fine. You debate whether to go outside, but your sandals, hand-me-downs from a cousin who died in a chariot incident, are more whole than shoe. You sigh and tie them on anyway. The floor groans beneath you. One more heavy step and your building might file a complaint with the Senate. You check your money pouch, 2 bronze coins and a pebble. You keep the pebble for luck. You'll need it. You step into the street and are immediately hit with a wall of smell so dense it might qualify as a civic structure. It's a bouquet of human sweat, open sewer, fish guts, and hopeful herbs someone burned in a desperate act of air purification. The cobbled road beneath your feet is slick with something that glistens too much to be water. Welcome to the sensory landscape of Rome, where every inhale is a gamble. Your neighborhood, Subura, is what scholars politely call densely populated and what normal people would call permanently on fire. Every building leans like it's considering retirement. Washing lines crisscross the alleys like a failed attempt at string art. And yelling is the local dialect. Every corner sells something you don't want, fermented fish sauce. Used sandals, cursed amulets, and yet you keep checking the prices like it might somehow help. Today, your job is simple: survive. But the economy of Rome is in wartime free fall, which means the scribe shop you work at, copying legal notices, dull letters, and the occasional love poem for rich men who can't spell hasn't paid you in actual money for 2 weeks. You're now paid in bread tokens and passive-aggressive compliments like you're not completely useless. You duck into a side street and nearly collide with a cart stacked with amphorae giant clay jars filled with spoiled wine. The driver spits, not at you, but in protest of the gods or taxes or maybe just existence. Hard to tell these days. Even gods seem tired. You make it to the scribe's workshop, which is less workshop and more lean-to with a desk. The desk is a plank. Your ink is soot mixed with water and regret. The stylus is worn to a nub. Still, you sit. Because survival means pretending this is fine. Your first customer of the day is a portly man with rings on his fingers and no patience in his eyebrows. He slams down a note. It's an invoice for 2 goats, 4 amphorae, and an insultingly low bribe to a city official. You copy it, carefully. The man squints, grunts, and drops a half loaf of bread in your hand like he's bestowing gold. Your stomach growls. You share half with a street urchin who's been shadowing you all morning like a guilt-shaped ghost. She curtsies. You pretend not to notice she has no shoes. Historians still argue whether scribes were respected or tolerated. You're leaning toward tolerated, like an ink-stained mosquito. No one throws things at you, but no one makes room either. You exist in the legal margins. Literally. By mid-morning, your fingers are cramping. You've written so many declarations of debt, you start making up names. Titus the Tardy. Maximus owes a lot. No one notices. You wonder if you could sneak a poem in there. Something about how your stool has 3 legs and your soul has none. Then the warning horn blows 2 long notes. That means unrest, maybe a riot. You see a group of soldiers jog past, looking more annoyed than alarmed. You don't ask. You just lower your head and write faster. A shadow falls over your parchment. You look up. It's your supervisor. He grunts in approval not at your work, but at your decision to stay seated during a potential uprising. That's wartime loyalty, or cowardice. Hard to tell. By noon, the air is thick with heat and whispers. People talk about grain shortages, barbarian raids, senators fleeing. You sip water from a shared jug, pretending it doesn't taste like roof tile. A pigeon lands on your desk, coos at you, and poops on the edge of your parchment. You sigh. That's tomorrow's problem. Lunch break arrives with all the excitement of a rock slowly eroding. You stand, stretch your back, bad idea, and limp towards the food stall on the corner. They call it a thermopolium. But let's not get fancy. It's a countertop with pots. The pots contain warm things. Let's call it stew. But know in your heart that stew is being generous. You hand over your crumbly bread token and get a shallow bowl of lentil mush that appears to contain 1 ancient carrot and something that might once have been a bean. There's also a sliver of meat, possibly rat, possibly hope. The vendor smiles like he's feeding Caesar himself. You sit on a barrel. The spoon is wooden, cracked, and questionably clean. Still, you eat. It's this or hunger. You try to chew slowly, to trick your body into thinking there's more. The lentils stick to your teeth like they're making a home there. They might be. As you eat, you watch the world. A legionnaire with a bandaged arm haggles over honey. 2 children throw pebbles at a drunk man sleeping against a statue of Jupiter. The drunk man mutters something about taxes and farts himself awake. The children run. And there's the smell again. Not the street smell, this one's worse. A public latrine is nearby. And you're reminded that Roman sanitation, while technically advanced, is still a public group project with 0 privacy and a high chance of splash damage. Toilets here are long benches with holes, side by side, no dividers, just shared eye contact and shared regret. You try not to think about it, but that's impossible, especially when someone walks past holding a sponge on a stick, the Roman substitute for toilet paper. Communal, reusable, washed only in vinegar water if the stars aligned. The good news, it's biodegradable. The bad news, so are you. Historians still argue whether these latrines were hygienic marvels or disease accelerators. Based on the smell, you lean hard toward option B. You finish the last bite of your lentils and briefly consider licking the bowl. But that's how the worms get you. Or so you've heard. You toss the bowl back at the vendor, who catches it mid-gripe about food prices. Then you wipe your mouth with your sleeve. Because napkins are for senators, there's no time to rest. You've got errands. As a scribe, you're often tasked with odd jobs delivering messages, counting crates, reading letters to men who refuse to admit they're illiterate. Today, it's inventory. You shuffle toward the merchant docks, passing temples, bathhouses, and one man who appears to be yelling at a goat. At the docks, a shipment of dyed cloth is being unloaded. You're supposed to verify the colors match what's on the ledger. There are 7 shades of purple. You squint. They all look like purple to you. But one merchant insists this one is imperial violet, while the other calls it eggplant rage. You nod and scribble. They pay you not to argue. It's late afternoon now. The sun is blistering. You can feel it cooking the top layer of your skin, which already smells faintly of ink and disappointment. You head back toward the scribe's stall, only to be interrupted by a parade. Except it's not a parade. It's a funeral, a modest one. 1 flute player, 2 wailing women, and a very bored-looking donkey. The body is wrapped in linen and carried through the crowd like a loaf of bread too big for its basket. You bow your head, respect, or at least pretend. You can't help but wonder what your own funeral might look like. Hopefully with fewer donkeys. Back at your station, your stylus waits. So do the debt scrolls. You're still thinking about the eggplant rage cloth when your stomach makes a noise that could legally qualify as public disturbance. It's evening now, meaning dinner, and you're about to find out that lunch was the golden age of your nutritional day. Dinner in wartime Rome is like asking a toddler to cook, using only sadness and leftovers. You return home, which is generous considering your home is a shared insula, an ancient Roman apartment block made of timber, brick, and wishful thinking. You live on the 3rd floor, which means the ceiling sometimes leaks, and the stairs always creak like they're trying to get out of working overtime. You unlock your room, a single dusty chamber with a wooden latch, and step into the space that somehow contains both too much and absolutely nothing. There's a clay bowl on a shelf. It contains your supper, which your neighbor cooked. You're on shared cooking duty this week, and tonight's main course is barley gruel. Barley the working man's grain, gruel the working man's disappointment. It's been reheated over a charcoal burner, which is why it now tastes like someone tried to season cardboard with smoke and good intentions. You eat it slowly. Each bite is hot, bland, and slightly crunchy from the bits of grit that live in the barley sack like freeloaders. Your teeth protest, and your gums itch. But hey, at least there's no rat meat in this one. Or maybe that's the problem. You glance at your neighbor, who slurps theirs like it's ambrosia. Could be worse, they say. And they're right. You could be eating garum straight from the jar. Garum, Rome's favorite condiment, made from fermented fish guts, left in the sun until they become both liquid and legend. Historians still argue whether garum was genuinely beloved or just tolerated because taste buds hadn't evolved yet. You remember the one time you tried a spoonful. You had vivid dreams about drowning in a fish barrel and woke up swearing off sauces for a month. Garum does that to a man. The sun dips below the tiled rooftops. The room glows orange, then grey, then dark. You light a tiny oil lamp. The flame flickers weakly, like it's on strike for better wages. You consider your options read, write, or stare blankly into the wall like a philosopher with a concussion. You pick the wall. Noise filters in through the paper-thin plaster. Someone next door is arguing about taxes. Someone above is singing badly. Someone below is vomiting, probably from the barley. You wonder, not for the first time, why you haven't just moved to the countryside. Then you remember because in the countryside, dinner is the same, but now you're also getting trampled by pigs. You sip some water from your clay cup. It tastes like it was previously occupied by moss and sadness. You swish it around your mouth like that makes it safer. It doesn't. Still, you're lucky in a way. As a literate citizen with a job, however underpaid, you at least get to eat twice a day. Many others don't. Food shortages, military blockades, And general incompetence have turned many city blocks into queues for nothing. Some people eat acorns, some eat weeds, some eat nothing and call it fasting for the gods. The gods, of course, remain silent. There's no dessert. The concept of dessert doesn't exist unless you're rich. For you, the sweet course is not dying. And so far, you're succeeding. Barely. The air inside your room is thick with smoke and sleep. Your tunic itches, not metaphorically, but in a way that suggests your clothes are either plotting against you or are already halfway sentient. You haven't changed your tunic in 5 days. That's fine. It's your good tunic. It's woven from rough-spun wool, dyed an enthusiastic brown, the kind of brown that says, "I'm blending in with the dirt because resistance is futile." You cinch it with a leather belt that has seen better centuries. Underneath, there's a linen undertunic, or there was. You haven't seen it since the last wash day, which was sometime before the comet, or a plague, or maybe before your cousin borrowed it and moved to Gaul. And yes, you're technically a merchant, but the dress code for urban poor with literacy skills doesn't exactly allow for silk togas. That's for senators and philosophers who mostly argue about the moral implications of beards. You tug your cloak over your shoulders. It's goat wool, because sheep are luxury animals now. The cloak is heavy, stiff, and smells faintly of wet animal even when dry. But it keeps you warmish, which in Roman terms means less miserable. Your sandals are made from scrap leather and string. Technically, they're open footwear, which sounds breezy until you realize the streets of Rome are an open sewer. The moment you step outside, your toes start playing, "What did I just step in?" It's a game no one wins. You wish you had boots, or even better socks. But socks are for barbarians, literally. Roman elites considered them an uncivilized luxury. Historians still argue whether that opinion was fashion snobbery or foot-related masochism. You scratch your arm again. Fleas. They've moved in and started a family. Somewhere inside your tunic, a flea wedding is taking place. You can almost hear the fiddles. You tried getting rid of them once by boiling your clothes in vinegar and hanging them in sunlight. The fleas threw a rooftop party in your armpit that night. Clean clothes, in your world, are like honest politicians rumored to exist but never confirmed. Laundering, such as it is, happens at public Follonica laundries where clothes are soaked in human urine. That's not a joke. Urine contains ammonia, and ammonia is apparently what happens when chemistry meets despair. You once paid a boy to take your tunic to the Follonica. He came back 3 hours later and said it ran away. You believed him. You scratch your back using a wooden stick you've nicknamed the diplomatic solution. The itching subsides but never truly ends. You've accepted that your relationship with hygiene is one of mutual betrayal. You glance out the window. A group of boys run past, bare-legged, tossing pebbles. One of them is shirtless, coated in dust and joy. You envy him not for the shirtlessness, but for the freedom of not noticing lice when they're biting. Your neighbor passes by in a tunic that's been patched so many times it resembles a mosaic. He waves. You nod back, admiring how he's stitched a leaf motif across his shoulder to distract from the moth holes. He once said, clothing in Rome is less about fashion and more about not freezing, not flashing, and not being arrested for impersonating a senator. There's an entire law code about who gets to wear what. As a merchant, you're squarely in the functional burlap sack category. Still, people manage. A touch of red thread here, a decorative clasp there, people will find a way to feel dignified, even if their undergarments haven't been washed since the last eclipse. So you step into the street, cloaked, sandaled, and moderately infested, ready to do business. Or at least to survive until you can sit down again and scratch without shame. Your teeth hurt. Again, not the sharp pain of something fresh and violent, more like a slow, passive-aggressive throb. The kind that suggests your molars are plotting a mutiny. You swirl your tongue over your gums, hoping the pain will magically resolve itself. It doesn't. Your breath smells like you chewed on last week's fish sauce. Welcome to Roman dental hygiene, or, more accurately, the complete absence thereof. You don't own a toothbrush. That's a barbarian luxury from the far corners of the earth. If you're lucky, you might scrape your teeth clean with a twig or rub them with crushed oyster shells. The irony is that these scrubbers are so abrasive, They probably do more harm than good. But hey, they make you feel like you're doing something. And in Rome, feeling clean is 90% of the battle. Your gums are swollen. Your breath could melt bronze. You've had the same cavity brewing for years, ever since that one bad shipment of candied dates. You bite into them with your good side now. It's a strategic dental maneuver, like flanking your opponent in battle, only your opponent is sugar. And your shield is denial. The rich, of course, have different problems. They use powdered charcoal, ash, and the occasional crushed pearl to whiten their teeth. Because nothing says oral health like grinding your enamel into oblivion for aesthetic reasons. Historians still argue whether the Roman elite actually cared about hygiene or whether it was all just theatrical performance, like washing your hands before a public sacrifice. There are no dentists. Well, not in any professionalized sense. There's a man who sharpens blades and also pulls teeth. He's called the extractor. He's also your cousin's neighbor. His preferred method is yank, hope, and try not to die. You saw it once. A woman sat on a stool, gripping the sides, and he leaned in with tongs that looked more suitable for turning pork over a fire. He counted to 2 and skipped 3. She screamed, bled, fainted, and woke up with one less problem in her mouth. You remember every second. The city reeks of garlic, oil, and mild decay, and it only gets worse as the sun climbs. Heat makes the smells bloom, and your mouth, with its neglected ecosystem, feels like a small sewer pretending to be a tongue museum. You rub your jaw and consider herbal remedies. There's mastic gum tree resin that acts like a primitive breath mint. You chew it now and then, pretending it helps. You've also tried rinsing with wine. That works if you define works as gets you drunk enough not to care. The forums sell all kinds of magical cures. Powdered boar tusk, goat bile paste, poppy seed resin. Most of them make your condition worse or numb you into euphoria, which honestly isn't the worst trade-off. The real problem is, you know it won't get better. You know this low-grade pain will eventually explode into something dramatic and life-threatening. That one day, you'll wake up with a jaw so swollen you can't speak, and someone will suggest bloodletting as a solution. You'll say no. They'll say it's tradition. Medicine in Rome is a wild guessing game. One day you're applying crushed figs to your temple. The next, someone's bleeding you because Mars is in retrograde. And while some physicians claim to understand humors and bile balances, most are just winging it with confidence and decent sandals. You've heard of people curing toothaches with a prayer to Apollo and a dead mouse hung around the neck. That's not even the weirdest remedy. Someone once recommended boiled donkey urine. You passed on that one. Even desperation has standards. As the day drags on, your headache joins the mouth pain in a symphony of discomfort. You try to distract yourself with coin counts and trade plans, but every clink echoes in your skull. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, so are your teeth. Your back is stiff before sunrise. That's your cue, not the crow of a rooster, not a city bell, just pain. You swing your legs over the edge of your thin straw mat, which crackles like it's filled with old celery, and brace for another joyful day in Roman commerce. Spoiler, there will be no joy. Being a merchant in wartime Rome is like running a lemonade stand during a sandstorm. You try to stay open, but the odds are against you. Food is harder to come by. Metal prices fluctuate like a drunk senator's mood, and supply routes are constantly being liberated by bandits with better swords than the army. Today's first task, load up your ox cart and hope it doesn't splinter on the way to the forum. Your ox is named Titus. He hates his job, possibly you, and the entire concept of roads. You pat him gently and whisper threats disguised as affection. The roads, by the way, are a mixed blessing. The Roman Empire built some of the best infrastructure in the ancient world straight, solid, and full of potholes that could swallow a chariot whole. You wobble along, dodging beggars, sewage spills, and a man selling fermented fish sauce out of a leaking jar. Historians still argue whether that sauce was a delicacy or an act of communal revenge. Once at the market, it's a game of stamina and subtle insults. Merchants shout louder, undercut faster, and smile faker than any arena performer. You eye a rival selling knockoff pottery. His clay cracks in the sun, but his charm is ironclad. You hate him. He knows. You lay out your wares, salted olives, dyed cloth, imported glass beads from the East that may or may not be real. Authenticity is a spectrum, and your customers mostly want sparkle. You're surrounded by noise. Someone is arguing about the price of barley. Someone else is being pickpocketed in slow motion. A boy tugs on your tunic, offering a lump of coal shaped like a horse. You buy it. You're not sure why. This is the part where the weather kicks in. The sun blazes like it has a vendetta, and your tunic sticks to you like guilt. You wipe sweat from your eyes using the least dirty part of your sleeve. Good news, you don't have a heat rash yet. Bad news, it's only mid-morning. After a few hours of haggling, you've made enough for a small loaf of bread, a chunk of goat cheese, and maybe a seat at the bathhouse if they're not rationing water today. You consider skipping lunch to save up for a new tunic. Yours smells like regret and mildew. You load up what's left, cover it with a cloth, and head to your storage cellar if cellar means an underground hole guarded by 3 rats and a door with personality issues. It squeaks open with a noise that suggests emotional trauma. You stash your goods, bribe the rats with crumbs, and head back to the street. At this point, your legs are numb, your back is plotting mutiny, and your stomach growls in Latin. You plop onto a stone bench that's seen at least 3 plagues and wonder why no one invented cushions yet. Work never ends. You still need to visit a blacksmith, settle a dispute with a supplier, and write 3 letters by hand, of course, on papyrus that costs more than your sandals. You dip a crude reed pen into ink and ruin your first sentence. It's fine. No one in Rome writes cleanly. It's tradition. You drift home at dusk, exhausted, bruised, and somehow covered in flour. A child runs past you screaming about soldiers. You nod. Same. Kid, same. You wake again in the middle of the night, not because you're rested, but because the wind has shifted. Cold air cuts through the wooden slats of your house like a nosy neighbor with an opinion. You tug your blanket tighter, which is heroic considering it's more holes than fabric and smells faintly of pickled fish and despair. Congratulations, it's winter in wartime Rome. Your breath fogs the air, your fingers are stiff, and your nose has begun its slow descent into iciclehood. Fire sure, if you can afford the wood, the last time you tried to light a fire indoors. The smoke convinced your neighbor you were being assassinated by ghosts. That ended with 6 people in your kitchen yelling "Exorcizo te" and 1 guy stealing your loaf of bread. By morning, your joints creak more than your door. You wrap yourself in layers of wool if layers means 2 threadbare tunics and a scarf that's mostly symbolic and head out. The cold slaps you like a disapproving senator. Historians still argue whether winter was more deadly to Romans than the Gauls. You're currently leaning toward yes. Now the sky spits snow. Not the gentle, postcard kind. This is sharp, stinging snow that gets in your eyes, your ears, and places snow should not be. The cobbled streets are slick with slush, and every step is a negotiation. People fall. No one laughs. Laughter is for warmer months. But wait, maybe summer will be better. Ah, summer, that magical time when everything smells like warm meat, even things that aren't meat. Your home turns into a clay oven. The walls absorb heat with the enthusiasm of a Roman senator accepting a bribe. At night, you lie awake, soaked in sweat and existential dread, praying for a breeze and cursing the gods of humidity. Flies descend like tourists at a chariot race. You fan yourself with a broken amphora shard and try to remember what cool air felt like. You dream of snow. Yes, even the stabbing kind. Outside, the roads shimmer with heat. Horses look like they're rethinking their life choices. The forum is quieter in summer, not because people stay home, but because they're too dehydrated to shout properly. The public fountain, your main water source, smells vaguely of boiled feet. Insects rule now. Mosquitoes the size of grapes. Bees with anger issues. And then the worst gnats. They get in your ears, your eyes, your soul. You wave them off with the fury of a man who's had enough, but they return, somehow stronger. The irony, you still wear roughly the same clothes year-round. Romans had seasonal fashion, like a sponge has a skincare routine. So in winter, you freeze. In summer, you bake. And in both, you itch, constantly, from sweat from fleas, from life, oh, and rain. Let's not forget that. Rome's roads are famously well constructed, but even they can't prevent puddles from becoming small inland seas. You once lost a sandal in one and mourned it for a week. Still, every day you make your rounds. Whether the wind is biting or the sun is scalding, you show up to sell, trade, plead, and endure. Your reward, a warm stew, a mug of sour wine, and maybe just maybe a moment when the wind stills or the night cools enough for your brain to forget where you are. Then the next season rolls in, and you start the circus all over again. You blink at your reflection in the fountain. The water is moving. Barely. It's got a film on it now, greenish, like the inside of a poorly kept wine jug. But it's water, and technically you need it to live. You hesitate just long enough to make the bacteria feel welcome. Then dip your cup. Every Roman knows water is both friend and frenemy. In theory, it sustains you. In practice, it betrays you. Boiling it helps assuming you have fuel, time, and the luxury of paranoia. Otherwise, you drink and hope the gods like you. Spoiler, they usually don't. You take a sip and instantly regret it. It's warm, tastes faintly of copper and wet stone. And there's a suspicious crunch. That might have been a beetle. It's best not to look. Bathing, that's cute. That's a rich person thing, unless you count your rain-drenched toga walk home as immersion therapy. You haven't had a proper wash in days. Or was it weeks historians still argue whether daily bathing was common or just a flex among the elite? For you, it's a logistical nightmare. The public baths are incredible, massive, ornate, marvels of engineering. They're also not free. And during war, they're closed more than open, or worse, full of soldiers using the hot steam rooms as therapy and recruiting centers. Not to mention the rumors of lice parties, fungal surprises, and at least one confirmed rat who swims better than you. If you do get in, you strip naked in a room full of strangers, give your clothes to a kid with a stick. Why are they always so aggressive with that stick? And try not to die from hypothermia or humiliation. The water is murky. Someone's always loudly philosophizing. There's always a guy shaving his chest with a knife. You leave feeling somehow dirtier. And then there are days when the aqueduct's slow to a trickle. Sabotage, earthquake, divine smiting. Take your pick. You scramble with everyone else, buckets in hand, to find water, any water, wells, puddles, a leaky ceiling. You once considered scooping rainwater off a marble statue's thigh. It wasn't your proudest moment. You adapt. You learn to ration. You drink when you must and pray afterward. You wipe your face with your sleeve and convince yourself it counts as a wash. And when someone offers wine, you accept not for the taste, but because fermented grape juice is statistically safer than whatever's dribbling out of the aqueduct. Your skin cracks from dryness, your lips split, your stomach flips unpredictably, like a badly made chariot wheel. But you keep going. You've got goods to move and coins to count. Your body is 70% despair and 30% questionable liquid. But you're still standing. Every drop is a gamble. Every bath, a luxury. Every barrel, a potential Pandora's amphora. And yet, here you are alive, unbathed, and slightly glowing in the dark. Possibly the water's fault. And now, as night falls and you hear the burble of another rainstorm rolling in, you wonder, could you survive this again tomorrow? Probably not. Now, we wake up in ancient Egypt under the reign of the pharaohs, where the pyramids cast long shadows over a world that's somehow both majestic and miserable. The sun hasn't fully risen, but the room you're sleeping in is already unreasonably warm. You're lying on a mat stuffed with papyrus stalks that poke your spine like they're trying to escape their own afterlife. The floor is packed earth, your blanket is yesterday's sweat, and your roomsmate is a goat. Yes, a real goat named things like meat or rent insurance, depending on your family's optimism. You would never think that a civilization with gold-covered tombs would forget to invent windows. But here we are. The walls are made of mud brick, insulated to keep out heat, which, in theory, should help. In practice, it means your room traps air like a clay oven. You're already sweating, and you haven't even moved. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment with your current location And what time you're watching this bonus points if you're sweating too. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift your aching limbs and sit up. Your back cracks in 3 places. You're 19, but that's middle-aged here. You shuffle to the corner where your sandals wait, curling up like sleeping dogs. They're made of reeds and smell faintly of mildew and regret. You step outside and immediately eat a faceful of sand. The wind is always doing that, blasting through the alleyways like an unpaid debt collector. The village is waking up. Roosters scream, children scream louder, and someone is already arguing over dates. The fruit kind, not the romantic kind. No one has time for love when granaries are empty and your only job security is divine favor. You look around your home. It's 2 rooms if you squint, 1 for sleeping, 1 for everything else. There's a cooking area with no chimney, so the whole space smells like last week's barley stew. There are no beds, no chairs, no sinks. Furniture isn't common unless you count the upside-down basket that doubles as a table, stool, and pest control. And there's no privacy. You share this space with your parents, your 3 siblings, 1 goat, and sometimes an uncle who drops by when his wife is mad at him. Conversations are public, bodily functions are public. And if you cry, someone hands you a turnip and tells you to get over it. Outside, the Nile glows faintly in the distance, like a benevolent god or a slow-moving sewer. Depending on the season, the morning light bounces off the temples and reflects down onto the dusty streets, casting long, pyramid-shaped shadows. You stretch and yawn, trying to mentally prepare for the day ahead. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, so are your fleas. You scratch your scalp and mutter a half-hearted prayer to Thoth, or maybe Bastet, honestly. At this point, you'll take help from any divine department that covers plagues of the personal hygiene variety. The day has begun. Your first challenge isn't spiritual enlightenment or writing elegant hieroglyphs, it's finding a place to relieve yourself. Welcome to the ancient Egyptian toilet experience, a combination of hide and seek, smell endurance training, and social vulnerability therapy. There are no bathrooms in your home. That luxury belongs to temples, elite households, or maybe some blessed administrative buildings with latrine pits, though historians still argue whether those were genuinely private or just ceremonial outhouses to impress visiting scribes. For you, the options are simpler and more horrifying. There's the go-in-a-pot method, which involves a clay jar discreetly tucked behind a curtain, read a fraying linen sheet. Or you can shuffle barefoot through the alleyways to the communal spot. Guess which one smells slightly worse? This so-called latrine is more of a dirt trench with some palm fronds tossed over it, like a half-hearted gift wrap. It's surrounded by buzzing flies the size of date pits and watched over by a cat who appears to be silently judging everyone. Ancient Egyptians loved their cats, but that doesn't mean the cats loved you back, especially not while you're squatting near their sunbeam. Toilets are a kind of public theater here. You don't really get privacy, but you do get conversation. It's common to discuss grain prices, neighbors' marriages, or how bad yesterday's beer was while hovering over the trench. It's oddly communal, in a we all suffer together way. Now for the cleanup. No toilet paper, no water, just sand. Maybe a shard of broken pottery if you're feeling fancy. Archaeologists call these ostraca. But let's be honest, that's just academic branding for sharp things someone regretted using. Some historians still argue whether cloth wipes were available to the working class, or if they were a pharaonic perk. You, tragically, are not a pharaoh. You make your way back home. Wiping your hands on your tunic, yes, it's disgusting. But there's no running water, no hand soap, and certainly no little lavender-scented bottle from a spa. You spit into your hands and rub them together, because ancient self-cleaning sometimes means using spit like it's Purell. By the time you return, your little sister has started pounding grain on the kitchen floor, not in a kitchen, just on it. The rhythmic thunk echoes off the mud brick walls and mixes with the sound of the neighbor's baby screaming like he's being sacrificed to Anubis. He's not. Yet. You're not disgusted anymore. You're used to it. That's the most dangerous part. Normalcy. Filth, odor, open-air embarrassment, it all blends into your routine. like sand in your food or lies in politics. And this, right here, is the glamorous underbelly of life beneath the pyramids. You step outside into the blast furnace that is Egypt at dawn, your stomach full of bread rocks and barley soup sludge. It's time to work. Not in a 9 to 5 with coffee breaks kind of way. More like from sunrise until you drop and then keep going kind of way. Welcome to the ancient labor economy where rest is myth, water is fantasy, and complaining is an Olympic sport that no one has time to play. Your job today hauling limestone or mixing mud brick, or maybe fetching buckets of water from a well half a mile away because your neighbor's goat kicked over your family's ceramic storage jar. Honestly, the details blur. All you know is the work begins before the sun rises and ends only when you feel like the sun has moved into your bones. The tools are simple, which is history's polite way of saying utterly backbreaking. A wooden hoe, a basket strapped to your back, a rope that's never long enough and always frays at the worst moment. No gloves, no boots, just your bare, dusty feet and a tunic that is absolutely not optimized for movement, comfort or dignity. You sweat a lot. Ancient Egypt may have had pyramids, but it definitely did not have deodorant. The air smells of human effort, sun-scorched stone, and faintly fermented breath. Your skin grows sticky with a mix of dust and your own salty shame. Somehow, there's always a supervisor nearby. He doesn't do much except yell, his stick decorative, unless you stop moving. Historians still argue whether laborers were paid in rations or coin, but your back doesn't care. It just wants to not hurt anymore. You glance over at your friend hauling clay. He's 12. His spine already has opinions about the future. Children work, everyone works. If you're not working, you're probably dead or being prepared for burial, which requires more work, just not from you. Women are grinding grain, baking flatbread, weaving linen, and watching 6 children at once with the kind of multitasking that would break a modern smartphone. One hand on the spindle, the other preventing toddler number 4 from face-planting into a fire pit. You dream of a break, just one shady corner, one gulp of clean water, one moment without sand grinding into your eye. But instead, it's more hauling, more lifting, more pretending your spine isn't starting a revolution. Your diet doesn't support this kind of effort. You burn through your barley energy by mid-morning and operate on spite for the rest of the day. No protein shake, no electrolytes, just an occasional fig, if you're lucky, and the distant hope that you won't collapse in front of the foreman. And yet, you laugh. A little. Someone farts dramatically while pushing a wheelbarrow of dung, and the noise cuts through the heat like a divine blessing. Jokes are currency. So are calloused hands, cracked heels, and sunburns shaped like your neckline. By sunset, you're not walking. You're swaying, dragging, melting. Your muscles scream with every step, and your soul politely requests a new body. You arrive home and collapse into the same smoke-stained mat you woke up on. Dinner is probably another round of dental roulette bread, maybe with lentils. You're too tired to taste anything anyway. Your body isn't asking for pleasure, it's just begging for sleep. But sleep will have to wait. First, you must navigate the terrifying ordeal of Egyptian medicine. Because tomorrow, you have a toothache. You wake up before the rooster crows. Because your molar has declared war. It's not a gentle throb. No. It's the kind of pain that radiates through your jaw, your ear, and somehow, your moral compass. You'd swear your teeth are vibrating. There is no toothbrush, no toothpaste, and definitely no appointment with Dr. D. Papyrus, DDS. You're on your own in the great dental apocalypse of 1250 BCE. This is ancient Egypt, where dental hygiene is more of a concept than a practice. The average person's mouth is a museum of damage. The culprit bread. It always comes back to bread, not the soft, fluffy kind you dream of. Egyptian bread is coarse, full of sand, and basically an edible grindstone. Every bite gently files your teeth into oblivion. The Nile floods bring silt into the grain. The grinding process adds more grit. And by the time that bread reaches your mouth, it's less meal and more dental sabotage. Historians still argue whether Egyptians understood the long-term effects of their grain-heavy, sand-seasoned diet. Some believe they used herbal mouth rinses and toothpicks. Others suggest prayers and incense played a bigger role in oral care than anything resembling science. Either way, you're in agony. And what's the remedy for a rotten tooth in Pharaoh's realm? Pliers. Stone pliers. Well, not pliers exactly, more like a determined neighbor with a chisel and a drinking problem. You sit on the floor, gripping your knees while a friend tries to wiggle the infected tooth free with a copper tool that looks more suited for woodworking than surgery. There is no anesthetic, just a leather strap to bite. Which is ironic, since biting is the reason you're in this mess to begin with. The pain is apocalyptic. You scream into the void, hoping Ra, god of the sun, will smite you with a mercy bolt. He doesn't. He's busy. Eventually, the tooth pops free or breaks in half. Either way, there's blood, some faint crying, and a vague hope you won't get a fatal infection from the unwashed hands of your would-be dentist. You rinse with beer. Yes, beer. Because it's cleaner than the water, and at this point, it doubles as medicine, mouthwash, and emotional support. You'd think things couldn't get worse, but the next morning, your gums swell like angry balloons. You look like you're storing a papyrus scroll in your cheek. No antibiotics, no antiseptic, just a poultice made of honey, onion, and hope. Oddly, honey helps. It has antimicrobial properties. Ancient Egyptians were obsessed with it. They used honey on everything: wounds, eyes, embalming corpses. So naturally, you smear it all over your aching gums and try to believe this is medicine, not dessert in the wrong location. Meanwhile, your breath could kill a scarab beetle. You'd brush, but there's nothing to brush with. Some elite classes used frayed sticks or ash mixed with natron, basically salt, plus baking soda. But you're not elite. You're lucky if your mouth doesn't attract flies. And when it's too much, there's always ritual. The priest offers spells to soothe your pain, chants the names of gods with healing powers. Whether they work or not is beside the point. It's the only thing that feels like comfort in this molar madness. You lie in bed that night, mouth throbbing, face hot, jaw twitching. You survived another day of bread-related trauma, medical improvisation, and early morning scream therapy. But tomorrow is coming, and tomorrow, you go back to work. You shuffle out of your mud brick dwelling, clutching your jaw and trying not to wince. Unfortunately, the day does not pause because you're in pain. No one asks if you're okay. This is ancient Egypt. Sick leave is a concept for the gods, not for you. You are a laborer, and laborers labor. That's your role in the cosmic order. Mut. The divine principle of harmony somehow includes your backbreaking routine under 40-degree heat. You grab your worn tools, a wooden hoe, a basket woven from reeds, and something that may have once resembled a shovel if you squint and join the line of hunched workers headed for the fields. It's not glamorous. There is no golden chariot waiting. There is no breakfast buffet. You're lucky if you had a few sips of sour beer and a lump of yesterday's bread, which now doubles as both food and a potential building material. You wade into the fields, the mud squelching beneath your bare feet. Yes, bare, because sandals wear out quickly and are a luxury not afforded to people like you. Your soles have the texture of tree bark. Your toenails are interpretive. With a groan, you begin digging irrigation channels. Or maybe you're planting barley or hauling clay. Honestly, it all blurs together into a single, sweaty montage of stooping, lifting, sweating, swatting flies, and hearing someone yell faster. Women are out here too. There's no gender equality movement, yet just shared exhaustion. They're hauling water, grinding grain, gathering reeds, weaving linen, and somehow keeping toddlers from wandering into crocodile territory. Multitasking, but in survival mode. Children are not spared. If you can walk, you can work. Small hands carry firewood, chase chickens, or help shape bricks. Playtime is not scheduled. It occasionally happens by accident if someone drops a tool. You look over and see your neighbor, an older man, slumped under a fig tree. He's been laboring since the reign of the last pharaoh. His eyes are tired. His joints make noises that violate the laws of acoustics. He mutters about the good old days when at least the tools were heavier, so you didn't have to make as many trips. Historians still argue whether laborers like you were paid in beer, bread, or just survival. Some evidence suggests a wage system involving rations. Others say you worked under corvée, a kind of state-enforced obligation where not working meant trouble possibly involving guards with sticks. You get a 15-minute break around noon. That's enough time to sit on a rock, pour some lukewarm beer into a cracked cup, and reflect on how your life has somehow become a cautionary tale for the future. Then it's back to the grind. Literally. You spend the afternoon helping build a granary wall, which is ironic, because you personally have no grain. You lug baskets of sun-baked bricks, line them up, slather them in mud mortar, and pray the sun doesn't boil your brain like a poorly stored fish. And at the end of the day, you're not done. You drag your aching body home and still have to help your household mend clothes. Grind more grain, chase the goat that keeps chewing the roof. There's no gym, no Pilates, no ergonomic anything. Just labor, pure, unfiltered, joint-destroying labor. And yet, you lie down that night on a mat under a buzzing cloud of flies, with a cracked tooth and a sore spine, and you realize something weird. You survived, barely. But you did. You wake up to the sound of something dropping on your head. It's a beetle, a big one. It lands with authority, as if it owns the place. You swat it away half-heartedly and sit up, the stiffness in your neck suggesting that your mat spent the night plotting against your spine. Congratulations. It's another day in Egypt, and that sun, once again, rises with zero chill. You step outside and are immediately reminded of your eternal frenemy, the weather. There are 2 seasons in your part of the Nile, hot, and somehow even hotter. And today it's the second one. Already, sweat begins to form behind your knees, which is an impressive feat considering you've only been vertical for 30 seconds. You're a laborer, or a scribe, or a merchant, doesn't matter. Everyone has to deal with the sky fire. The rich might have shade and thick walls and linen fans wielded by exhausted servants. But you get a woven reed hat and a prayer to the gods of not getting heat stroke. The wind carries dust, always dust. It gets in your eyes, your mouth, your clothes. It's so fine that you breathe it in without noticing, and then cough it out like you're auditioning for a sandstorm. Your teeth crunch when you chew. During winter, you might think you're in for a reprieve. The air cools a little, which sounds great until your house turns into a stone refrigerator. There's no insulation. Your bed is still a mat. Your only defense is a scratchy wool blanket that somehow manages to be both too thin and too itchy. You curl into a ball like a shivering cat and hope your nose doesn't fall off in the night. And a summer, oh summer, the kind of heat where the walls sweat. You swear you once saw a chicken lay a hard-boiled egg. You learn to do everything slowly, not for spiritual reasons, but because if you move too fast, your brain might liquefy. You understand, deeply and spiritually, the concept of melting into the floor. Clothes offer no help. You have one linen tunic that used to be white. Now it's more of a historically significant beige. You wash it when the Nile floods, which is to say, almost never. It clings to your body when you sweat, which is all the time. And when a breeze hits, it becomes a soggy flag of surrender. You don't sleep well either. The nights are either too cold or too hot, depending on the time of year. Either way, you lie awake, listening to the chorus of frogs, jackals, and the occasional human scream from someone stepping on a scorpion in the dark. And the bugs thrive. Mosquitoes the size of grapes, beetles that clack when they walk, flies with PhDs in finding your nostrils. Still, the sun is revered. It's Ra, after all, the celestial ruler. So you respect it while also cursing it under your breath like a guilty heretic. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians truly saw the weather as divine punishment or just an annoying fact of life. There are poems that praise the sun for giving life. And there are probably unrecorded grunts from farmers who would have traded a pharaoh's gold for one decent thunderstorm. You trudge through it all, sweat pouring, skin burning, eyelids sticky from dust and heat. Because you have to. There is no escape. There is only the next hour. And the next. And the beetle. Back again. This time, with friends. You could drink something. You think, you should drink something. But here's the ancient Egyptian hydration dilemma: the Nile is both your savior and your saboteur. On the one hand, it provides everything: irrigation, transportation, fishing, bathing, even some ancient proto-Instagram sunset vibes if you squint just right. On the other hand, it's also a soup of fish guts, crocodile waste, decaying offerings, and whatever your neighbor just dumped upstream. You approach the water jar in your home. It's ceramic, it's chipped, and it's holding the closest thing to drinking water you have Nile filtered, sun-warmed, and lovingly seasoned with sediment. It smells like a pond that's seen things. You take a sip, your stomach gurgles, somewhere deep inside. Your gut bacteria start texting each other. It's happening again. Boiling it helps. Sometimes, if you have time, and firewood, and the patience not to chug it before it cools down and peels the skin off your tongue. Bathing technically a thing, but culturally risky. Ancient Egyptians prized cleanliness, sure, but they also feared that bathing too often opened the pores to welcome disease. You're expected to rub natron, a mixture of baking soda and literal salt, into your armpits instead of soap. So you exfoliate with chemistry class and call it a spa day. You bathe infrequently. And when you do, it's an event. You strip, you wade into water that is colder than you remembered, and immediately get bitten by something. Probably a mosquito, possibly a worm. You scrub yourself with a palm fiber sponge, trying not to think about the crocodile that sunbathed here yesterday. Then you dry off with the same cloth you used to mop the floor. Cleanliness is a social illusion, and you're doing great. There are communal bathhouses, of course, but they're more like gossip arenas with buckets. Everyone talks, everything echoes, and someone is always laughing. You suspect it's about you. And yet, people in this era are obsessed with being clean. They shave their heads to avoid lice. They perfume their wigs. And they even use crocodile dung as contraception, which is impressive, if horrifying. You dab scented oil on your wrists and neck, not because it works, but because it masks the smell of daily survival for about 6 minutes. And you pray because that's what you do when water might heal or kill. You offer to Sobek, god of the Nile, asking for purification and mercy and maybe just a bug-free bath. Historians still argue whether people truly feared the spiritual corruption of dirty water more than the physical diseases. But either way, you're caught in the splash zone of both. You remember last month's diarrhea outbreak? That was fun. You bonded with your neighbors through moaning. You all swore off raw fish forever. Until tomorrow. Probably. As you step outside, still parched, still unsure if you're technically clean or just ceremonially damp. A boy runs past you with a bucket of water that sloshes onto your tunic. You sigh. Congrats. That's your bath for the day. You can't live without water. But in Egypt, it's not always clear you can live with it either. Night falls over the settlement like a hot cloth thrown on a fevered brow. You retreat indoors, or rather, into your box-shaped oven of clay bricks and darkness, hoping for rest. But knowing better, the air doesn't cool. It thickens. It sticks to your skin like steamed linen. You lie on a mat made of woven reeds that poke your ribs in places that seem medically impossible. And you try to sleep while sweat pools behind your knees and every itch feels like an insult. Outside, jackals howl, somewhere not far off. Someone is still arguing, possibly over goats, possibly just because shouting makes the mosquitoes flee. You curl up tighter, wrap your arms around your middle, and wish you had the energy to dream of a cooler life. Maybe one with personal space, or deodorant, or ceiling fans, but no, you live in Pharaoh's Egypt. And here, survival is a full-time performance, equal parts reverence, resourcefulness, and ridiculous rituals you can't escape. You offer prayers to gods you don't dare offend, obey rules you barely understand, and maintain a work ethic that would make modern bosses weep with joy and unions spontaneously combust. You get up at dawn. You work until exhaustion. You follow the rhythms of floods and taxes. You smile through toothaches and lice and the ceremonial application of animal fats to your face. Why? Because everyone else is doing it. And because, frankly, it beats being on the wrong side of a temple decree. As you lie there, blinking at the ceiling shadows, You hear it, the priest's late-night chant carried by the breeze. A reminder that the gods are always listening and that you, noble meat sack of clay and sweat, must always be presentable. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians were truly obsessed with order or just deeply afraid of chaos. But either way, you've bought into it. And now, like the thousands before you and the millions after, you keep going. Not because it's easy, but because stopping isn't an option. The Nile may gift you silt and flood and life. But it also takes your health, your privacy, your patience. And it's not done yet. And yet you're still here. Just don't drink the water. Word count 536. Wind down, let your breath slow. You've done enough today, survived dusty roads, divine bureaucracy, and the mildly homicidal toilet conditions of a civilization that built pyramids. But not plumbing. Your body aches in unfamiliar places. Your stomach complains, not from hunger, but from the memory of what you dared to call dinner. Still, the candlelight flickers gently on your stone wall, and for a moment, just a moment, it feels like peace. You stretch out on your mat. The night air cools slightly. Someone nearby is playing a flute, or maybe it's just the wind weaving through the reeds. Either way, it hums softly, like a lullaby written for those too tired to complain. Tomorrow, the Nile rises again. The priests chant again. You'll wake up, rinse off with yesterday's regrets, and keep living this dusty miracle called Egypt. But for now, let it all go. The gods are watching, yes, but they can wait. You've earned your rest.